Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
Where you look affects how you feel. Really? Hello, Mitaki Api, and welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School's campus. I'm Scott Wooster, today's Hochoka host. We're glad you've joined our circle for part 2 of a 3-part series on counseling services at St. Joseph's Indian School. Today, we talk with Dr. Karen Wiemers, psychologist, and Robin Connect, Director of Counseling Services. Dr. Wiemers helps us understand brainspotting, that where you look does affect how you feel. She and Robin will tell us how this therapy is utilized in counseling services provided by St. Joe's to our students. So welcome, Dr. Wiemers, and welcome Robin again.
Thank you.
And I'm going to call you Karen because we've been friends for 20 years now, probably. Yep. And so if that's okay, we'll drop
that's
Dr.
perfect.
Wiemers. So here we go, Karen. Just tell us, our viewers, a little bit about who you are and what you do here at the school.
Well, I am a licensed psychologist and a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I also have certification as a level 2 clinical traumatologist. And I have lived in Chamberlain for over 25 years, had a private practice here in town for many years, and worked with kids and adults and families. And since I've been at St. Joe's, I work predominantly with the students doing psychological testing. And then I also, as you know, consult with the family service counselors about their caseloads.
And part of that, the consulting with us, and we talked to Robin earlier. Robin had told us that we have 10 master's level counselors, some licensed, some not, but you do supervision with all of those counselors in one form or another.
Yes.
So you are intimate with the caseloads of probably 130 kids at the school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is a lot of work. And I should add that you did that along with your private practice for 15 years?
Yes.
Okay. And now have retired from private practice and are devoting your time to us.
Yes.
Which we're so thankful for.
Yes.
Thank you
I'm thankful to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are so many different things that you do. It would be hard to, at our school for our kids, it would be hard to exactly express them all. So we're going to talk about one of those particular things today, and that's brainspotting, which seems like kind of a new idea, but it's been around for about 20 years is my understanding. We've been trained in it. Our entire staff has been trained in it. Yep. But you're the one, I think, who understands it, obviously the best of our staff, and so we've asked you here to talk to us about that a little bit. And I think you had the same reaction to brainspotting as I probably did when we heard about it, which is, okay, this sounds a little kooky, but when you see it, and I think this is a challenge for our viewers too, when they see it, when they hear about it, it's effectual. It makes a difference.
Very effective. Yes.
So what I'm going to ask you is just to give us a layperson's explanation of the therapy and how it came into practice.
Okay. Well, brainspotting was developed by a psychologist named Dr. Grand, David Grand, and his original story is that he was working with a client doing a specific form of EMDR, which he was using with that client to increase her skating performance.
EMDR is...
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing,
yes,
which I believe started predominantly as a trauma therapy, but has been found to also be beneficial for promoting beneficial skills, like if you're training to be an actor or to be a professional sportsman, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So he was doing that, addressing problems that client was having with doing a certain skating technique.
Right.
And while he was doing the EMDR, which involves moving the finger in front of the eyes and the eyes watching it, he noticed that at a very specific spot, there were subtle eye movements and facial movements that seemed to be reactive. And during that session, he happened to just stop at those spots And both he and the client noticed that she then was processing the difficulty she was having much more deeply, more thoroughly. And when she went to perform that technique the next time, she nailed it. Having not done a lot of verbalization about it, just having the brain do its responses and heal itself. And so then he started working, according to the story, started working with his other clients and has since then done a lot of research to study how the brain is impacted just by these spots where we hold our gaze, and that a healing can happen for the brain when you do that.
So Dr. Grant begins to use this, or has this big moment, this aha moment, that this could be effective for performance enhancement, in particularly in this case with a figure skater, and then turns it over and uses it in the trauma world. Okay, and so the three of us are very familiar with the trauma world. Can you explain trauma a little bit, and how this would be used to help with trauma?
Trauma, rather simply, is an experience that someone has where the processing of an event or an experience gets stuck in the brain. So when we have a normal experience that's not shocking or appalling or threatening, our brain just works through the information and files it where it needs to go pretty normally. But the definition of trauma is whatever that experience is, it locks up the processing, both sensory and neurocognitive systems, so that the memories sort of get stuck in the wrong parts of the brain, basically.
Yep.
And traumas can be little t traumas, right?
Yep.
That we might experience and then work through over time. They can be incident traumas like disasters. And again, most folks experience some symptoms of trauma, which is pretty normal for the first 1 to 3 months after an experience. And those resolve over time doing healthy coping skills, having support, talking about it a little bit. And then we have other traumas that can stick with us for a really, really long time, which could be incident traumas. Could be things like a rape or an assault. And then we have what we work with a lot, which is more of the developmental trauma, which some of our kids survive and go through, and our alumni and people in the world who have difficulties during their childhood that makes it traumatic, and then it's over a period of time. It's just not one incident. And then those things get stuck, and it can not only impact the processing of those memories, but also experiencing social relationships and trust relationships and managing emotions. And so we want to help heal those things so that the brain can work the way it's supposed to.
Right, and because it makes it incredibly hard to function in the world every day if you're reliving your trauma over and over and over.
Right. The problem with trauma is that you're not living in this moment. When you experience something in this moment, you're actually responding as if it was back then.
Right.
And so it's an issue of time displacement almost.
Right.
And so it makes it less functional.
Okay. Folk. And so what kind of therapy would you have used, would you still use to help heal trauma outside of Brainspotting?
There are a number of different approaches, and even with Brainspotting, it needs to be a good match to the client and the moment and the relationship. But you can do cognitive behavioral processing where you build in supports and you verbally process the trauma and do relaxation techniques to decrease the physiological responses of the stress. You can do art therapy. You can do movement therapy. The EMDR is another really good source. There's a lot of different cognitive approaches, but they all involve the processing of the trauma and the coping skills with the triggers. So that's the components for trauma work are first to have a trusted therapy relationship and to build coping skills so that when the distress comes within that relationship, the client has the ability to manage the symptoms so that they can tolerate the distress, and then to approach whatever the trauma was so that they can use those skills to work through that and have the brain stay calm so that the memories can get filed where they need to go appropriately.
3-step approach, right? I mean, it's all simplified.
All trauma approaches, if they're effective, have those 3 components.
Yep. Build the relationship.
Yep. Coping skills.
Relax,
Right.
and approach it the right way. And then 3, approach
the
it.
trauma.
Yeah. Awesome. So here's what I'm looking for from you. Because I think you really have to see brain spotting in action to understand what it looks like, what we're talking about. And so would you mind doing the technique with me? We've actually done this before. Full disclosure, years ago when I learned about it, Karen helped me with something by using brain spotting. And so let's just show the viewers what that might look like.
Okay. So pick a little T trauma that you want to think about, that you want to work on.
Okay.
What might that be?
I have to tell you?
Well, I have to have an idea.
Let me think of
So if you've got a picture, what comes to mind when you think of the little T trauma? What's the image that you get?
So the image I'm thinking of is I lost a student, former student actually, that came back to work with me.
Okay.
A kid I'm very close to. So
Okay.
he died. Yeah.
And when you think of that loss, what's the image that comes to mind?
What I see is him sitting at a drum, singing and playing, because he was a very traditional kid.
Now, when you think of that and you experience that distress in your body, where do you feel it in your body?
I'm going to say chest.
Okay.
And maybe, I know this is I guess it's not weird.
It's not weird.
So
Nothing's weird.
maybe behind the eyes a little bit.
Okay. Behind the eyes. So, and those sensations are, how would you describe the sensation behind your eyes and in your chest?
Full. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want you to do, as you focus on the tip of this wand, is be very aware of that fullness in your chest and behind your eyes, and visualize in as much detail as you can the image of him sitting at the drum. Now, your job while we do this is not to change anything, not to stop anything from changing, but just to observe and be very mindful. And I know you know what mindfulness is. So just be very mindful of your experience and note any changes, but don't get in the way and don't push it. And just watch the tip of the... And what I'm looking for is any kind of subtle eye movement or facial movement or body movement that would indicate that there's a stuck spot. And those are called reactionary things. And it's right about there. And now you just look at that spot. And again, allow that picture to be in your mind. And experience what goes on in your body mindfully. Okay, I'm going to count back from 3, and then we'll just talk again. 3, 2, 1. Take a deep breath. Let it go. One of the things that we didn't do, because we just sort of jumped in, was to have you rate the level of distress.
Right.
We would typically have you rate your level of distress before you started, and then as our session progressed, continue to have you rate that distress. And typically, My experience is the distress goes down as we do this. But what was your experience?
Well, the level of distress when we began was not high. I mean,
Right.
because I was kind of manufacturing the trauma on the
Right.
spot a little bit, but so I would say maybe a 5
Okay.
or 4. It's not
And that's on a scale of 10.
on a scale of 10. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say it was contrived trauma
Right.
because it's not, but
It's
in the
not.
moment it sort of was.
Right.
And then maybe at the end I would say 3, 2. I kind of felt like I had dropped
Okay.
down a little bit. Yep,
What happened with the image? Anything?
it disappeared.
Okay.
Yeah, I had more trouble holding on to it.
And what about the tightness?
Didn't notice it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would be the process that we would work through, of course, with longer time frames and more details. But one of the nice things about brain spotting, in addition to it being so effective, is that there doesn't have to be a lot of verbalization with it.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yeah.
can be if the student or client wants to explain things, and we certainly check in with each other, but it bypasses that thinking part of the brain and actually gets to where the trauma memories are stored a little bit more efficiently.
Which I would think why that has to be part of why it's really effective with children, especially, is because they don't have the verbal skills necessarily to be able to talk about trauma, and so it kind of bypasses that piece of it.
It does, and part of the stress of the trauma, of course, shuts down the language centers of the brain, which makes talking about trauma when you get stimulated by it very, very difficult because you can't find the words.
Right. At any age.
Right,
Yeah, if the trauma is significant enough.
right.
Yeah. Okay. And have you found it at the school, whether you've done it or other counselors that you supervise have done this, has it been effective with children?
Yes, I think we've found it very effective. We've had, before we had the full staff trained, I did it with a few students. Because it needs to be within a relationship, I would do it with the counselors for that student present, so they could continue to process those memories and issues in their own time. But we have had students that had behavioral issues because of impulsive anger. We have had students that had significant self-injury problems because of the self-loathing they had from the negative effects of the trauma that we've used this with. And over just a few to several sessions, they were able to identify sleeping better, the memories not being so intrusive during the day, the self-injury disappeared, those kinds of things. And then we were able to move on with more of the typical therapy of building even more coping skills and learning more social skills, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I've seen it be very, very effective.
Yeah. Great. So I think we all feel that brain spotting is effective. And I think, like I said before, we're surprisingly effective, because I think it's something that would be really easy to be skeptical about when you first hear it. I think that we're all trained in data. We do the science piece of this job. We're all master's level PhD folks and jumped into research, and then you hear that there's something where you can move your eyes or do something like this.
Stare at a stick.
Yeah, and you say, come on, this isn't. But we've all been trained in it. It is effective. So how, Robin, would we use this in our department with the folks that we have up there? Or how is it used in counseling services?
I think what we've done so far is if there's a student that is showing some behavior patterns or struggling and I don't know, kind of seems stuck in progress or progression in counseling, there'll be a conversation with Dr. Weimers, and usually then she pulls me in and we talk about, would brain spotting help with this student? And again, like she said, it's very relationship based. And so the counselor and the student have to kind of be at that space with their relationship for this approach to work. And so it's a kind of on the backside before the brain spotting occurs, there's a conversation of, would this be a good technique to try? And if everybody agrees, then we try it, and students, if they're responding well to it, it gets utilized. And if it's not really for them, that's okay too, and we move to a different trauma approach.
Right. But so you have to have buy-in from the student for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and they're skeptics too.
They are.
Aren't they? So I work with 7th through 12th grade boys, and sometimes they're more skeptical than other groups of other demographic groups, and so it can be tricky. But I want to thank both of you for coming on the show today. And let me just say that truly, I said it in the header when we came in, that what you bring to that department, and what I said this in the other piece of this with Robin too, was that it's amazing that we're spoiled with the kind of resources that we have in our department. But to have a psychologist who's willing to devote her time to 133 kids full time for our department is a huge deal. And to devote it to us as counselors too, to bring cutting edge techniques in. You give a lot to the kids, but you also stay current with the research. And this isn't the only thing we've done, brain spotting.
No.
We've had many over the years. So you've helped the knowledge of a lot of staff that work at the school, not just the counseling department, but meetings with staff but especially with the kids and their families. So thank you so much for what you do for all of us. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you. It is an honor to serve here with you guys.
We see that.
It's an honor.
And it was good to have you here, both of you, in Hochoka here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we would like to thank our viewers as well for joining us here in the Hochoka at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native American education today. So until next time, stay centered.